Question to open tonight's broadcast of the Leader's Pause. What is something that cannot be taken to an extreme and yet cannot exist without extremes? We're going to answer that question, and I'm going to try and help explain why it's so incredibly important for us to know the answer and what to do with it. So, stay tuned. Be right back for the Leader's Pause.
Welcome to the Leader's Pause, where leaders like you tune in to find calm, get clear, and level up. Tune in with best-selling author, speaker, and coach Hal Runkle as he helps you take back your time, your energy, and your decision-making power. All you have to do is learn to press your own pause button first. So, take a break, take a breath, take a knee, and learn to access your greatest human superpower, the ability to pause, think, and decide for yourself. It's time to find calm, get clear, and level up. The Leader's Pause starts now.
Good evening, afternoon. This is Hal Runkle. I'm your host. This is the Leader's Pause, where we help leaders learn to access their greatest human superpower, which is the ability to pause in the midst of stress, in the midst of chaos, in the midst of any sort of crisis, but learning to pause so that we have at least the chance that our highest thinking, our best self, if you want to use that term, has a chance to have a strong voice in deciding what it is we do next. Without that pause, we are at the mercy of our reactivity, which is rampant within us. Our brains, our bodies have evolved to scan for possible dangers, because in so many ways, our brains are still on the savannah in Ethiopia, and we are safely with our tribe of hunter-gatherers, and across the field, the open meadow, is a wonderful river and fruit trees we know will feed us and nourish us. But between here and there is a whole grass field, and we have no idea how many predators, cheetahs, lions, tigers, whatever, are waiting for us. So we're scanning for those. And that's how our brains naturally still operate, scanning for. In a prior episode, we talked about delivering bad news. And one of the key things to remember is that no news is always bad news, because without good information, our brains will reactively look for and imagine the worst. So that's why we teach the pause. It's why we have the show. It's why what I do in all of my consulting and coaching is help leaders learn to access the pause. And maybe it's a breath just like that. Maybe it is a regular practice, call it mindfulness or whatever you want to do in order to get centered, so that you're not at the mercy of those instinctive, primal, scanning urges for the negative. So we can think of, well, let's be strategic as much as possible. Well, one of the things that when we're in our best thinking, when we are paused, one of the things that can emerge is a quest to find the answer to my little riddle I did at the beginning of the show. So I'll ask it again. What is something that cannot be taken to an extreme and yet cannot exist without extremes? The answer is balance. Balance is one of the few things, I can't think of anything else, that cannot be taken to an extreme, but balance doesn't exist without extremes. And it's interesting how we talk about balance, how we revere balance. There's a legendary story in our family history of my son being little and being talked about balance, and he doesn't even know what the word means, and he's crying, "I don't want balance." Some of us sometimes. But balance is a natural thing throughout existence. It naturally occurs in nature. It naturally occurs in relationships. But the best of us, or the best success we all experience, is when we can consciously think about what balance we're seeking and how to find it. Now, there are some rules about balance that sometimes it leaves us feeling very frustrated, and we're searching for it. The most common one is life work balance. And here's why that is still a term that no one has figured out how to cure or how to find. Life work balance. Here's why it doesn't work. Is because you have not, in that term, we have not isolated what are the two extremes that we're trying to find balance in the middle of. Let's think about it. Balance cannot happen without tension. There needs to be tension. You cannot balance on on a tightrope if the rope ain't tight. It needs to be tight. So what is it tight between? So when we're saying life work balance, think of what just the phrasing of that is saying, that we're striving to find a balance point, a way of being in between life and work. Well, here's an interesting thing. Is work not part of life? Why do we call it life work balance? As if work is not a part of life. It is thing that we have to do in order to sever our that severs us from the rest of life. So it's a thing that we do in order to have a life. There was a show on Apple. I'm hoping they do a second season. It was on years ago. Oh, good Lord, I can't even remember what it's called now. And the premise of the show was that when you checked into the office, all your memories of your life outside the office are gone. And all you have are the relationships within that building and the memories of what's occurred in that building. Severance, that's right. Thank you, my producer, Emily, just to let me know that. So yes, so that was the show. And as soon as you left the building, all of your memories from work disappeared. And all you knew about, all you actually thought about was your life outside of work. Now, the reason why the premise of the show is the reason why they developed it is to protect whatever happened at work. So that it was kept private. But it was an interesting premise. But that's what the life work balance kind of says, is that work is not life. Work is this necessary evil we have to do in order to enjoy life outside of work. That is not working. Work is an integral part of life. It is think about it, the thing you will do more in your life than anything else other than sleep is work. And it might even be more work. But it is the time we will spend most of our lives doing. So why do we say it's different from life? And that's why we can't find a life-work balance, because those aren't the tension points. It would be like, first, let's identify the extremes. One would be overwork, and one would be no work whatsoever. So let's identify those extremes, and then what is the tension point? So instead of work-life balance, it would be we're trying to find a life balance between work and home, between work and play, between work and leisure, between work and family. Those are the things that we're striving to find a balance between. And what we're looking for is, what do we want to balance? We want to balance our time, obviously, but we also want to balance our energy. We want to balance our focus. We want to find some balance between, but we have to identify what the tension points are first. And then one of the things I do in companies is help people, let's identify those tension points, but let's not automatically castigate them as wrong. Again, you can't have balance without tension. And tension happens between two opposing points or opposing forces pulling in the opposite direction. But what happens when we need both? We do need work. We do need play. We do need work. We do need family and life relationships that aren't work. Let's take some others. We need a balance between profitability and growth. We need a balance between cutting costs and increasing revenue. Those things aren't going away. Those are tensions that need to be managed. One of the biggest problems that we encounter in any endeavor, but certainly at work, is we have this confusion between a problem and a tension. We've been talking about tensions, and tensions need to be managed because the positions that seem opposed are both necessary. I need to rest and I need to exercise. Yes, need to do both. Can't do both at the exact same time. Need both. But there's another kind of situation we encounter, and those are problems. Problems, think math, has a solution. A problem needs to be solved. A tension needs to be managed. Where so much of we get in trouble is when we confuse the two, when we try to manage a problem and solve a tension. Manage a problem, an employee who's not working out. All right, so we give them this plan of work that is going to somehow test them one more time. We're going to work with them. We're going to talk with them. We're going to keep them around. We're going to put them in a different situation. We're going to worry about it. We're going to worry about it. And finally, we're going to send the person on their way after we've waited way too long. As opposed to, no, it's a problem. It's got a clear solution. They are not a good fit here. Let's go. End it. Instead of trying to manage that problem. We solve tensions mistakenly when we think what we need to do from now on is cut costs. What we need to do from now on is get strict with all these kids. And we need to we need to eliminate screens from it's like, you see this in extreme dieting. You see it in extreme parenting. You see it in extreme anywhere where I'm attempting to solve by choosing one side of the tension. But that never works because the other side is still there. So what we're striving to do is how do we manage to find balance between those tension points? Well, the first thing is to identify the tension points. And then the second thing is a solution you probably have never heard of, but you've done many, many times. I have a specific name for it. And when we come back from the break, I'm going to clue you in as to what I see as the best solution for managing a tension and finding balance within those two extremes. So stay with us. We're going to be right back, and we're going to talk about the solution to finding balance between any things that seem in opposition. So we'll be right back. The Leader's Pause. I'm your host, Hal Runkle. I am an author and speaker and coach, and I get to work with executives and their teams, helping them find balance within the tensions, the natural tensions that exist as we strive to do anything significant. And one of the things that I help my clients do is learn to appreciate those tensions as not necessary evils, but the exact ingredients we need in order to grow. You cannot have balance without tension, and that tension is between two opposing forces who seem like they are pulling in the opposite direction. The struggle that we find is, what do I do when we know that we need both? Do we need to cut costs? Yes. Manage costs? Yes. Do we need to grow revenue? Yes. Can we do both at the exact same time? That's hard. Think about it. In dieting, do we need to build muscle and bones? Yes. Do we need to lose fat? Yes. Can we do both at the exact same time? It's not easy. It's very difficult to find that balance. So think of any other. Do we need to let our children empower them with autonomy and agency to make their own decisions and even mistakes so they can learn from them? Absolutely. Do we need to protect them from the worst mistakes? Absolutely. Which do you know now? How do I balance protecting my kid from life's dangers and yet exposing my kid to life's lessons? That's a good balance question. It's a tension that's never going to go away. My kids are 27 and 25, and there are still, I'm very, very reticent to offer advice at all, unless they ask for it. But there are still times when I want to intervene with something that says this. So, like, for instance, my son is in Mexico City for 2 months doing a modeling gig. He's lived abroad before. He's fine. He's 25 by himself. Um, but his so I wanted to, hey, instead of leaving your car at the apartment complex, bring it to our place. We'll keep it at our place. Well, his car is in really, really bad shape to the point of, you know what, I'm going to intervene and say, you're not driving this car. We have a third car here. We're going to give this one to you because he's a struggling actor and doesn't have any money. And that's cool. That's the way he is. But I'm really reticent to do that. So, because if you camp on one side and do too much of one side, then it messes up the balance altogether. Camp on, we're only going to um, cut costs, then you're going to miss chances to grow revenue. So how do we balance? Here's the answer. You don't. Trying to do both at the exact same time is one of the biggest fallacies in our human brains. We invent words that attempt to tell us that we can do multiple things at the same time. Multitasking. It's a word that got invented somehow in the last, I don't know, 40 years or something like that to say, well, no, I'm doing these two complex tasks at the exact same time and I'm doing them both well. No, you're not. And every study that's ever been done on it says not only are you not doing it, it's impossible to do it. Now, what our brains will adapt to do is called rapid switching. So our brains will switch very, very rapidly between the two and exhaust ourselves in the process because that burns a lot of calories. And like literally, it burns a lot of calories. Our brains burn more calories than the rest of our body because it needs so much energy. And we do that when we multitask. But also, whenever we multitask, every study's ever done said we do both tasks poorly or at a mediocre level. It's why I call multitasking, I call it multimediocrity. It is doing two things, three things at the same time at a very mediocre level. Because it's difficult to sit and concentrate and do one thing until it is done. And yet, if you did that and then switched to the other thing and did that until it's done, you would do both at a higher level and ultimately quicker than trying to do both at the same time. This is what I call the either and solution. Either or says, this is a problem that needs to be solved. I need to pick this one or this one. That's a problem because, as we discussed in the first half of the show, trying to solve a tension never works. Solving a tension means cutting the rope that you were going to balance, the tight rope that you were going to balance on, and parking out in one extreme does not work. Managing a problem doesn't work. When it needs to be severed, we need to sever it and pick one. So when you have two forces that you know you need, do I need space from my spouse? Yes. Do I need closeness with my spouse? Yes. Can you do both at the exact same time? No. Do you just want to pick one? No. The either and. Meaning, I've got to pick one because I can only do one thing at a time. But that doesn't mean I'm saying no to the other thing forever. I'm saying either, meaning I'm picking one, I'm saying and because I'm going to pick the other one later. So now I'm going to choose to have some space. Then I'm going to choose to have some closeness. Then I'm going to choose to have some space. then I'm going to choose to have some closeness. That's the either and. Now we're going to go through a season, however long you say, a month, a quarter, of managing costs. Then we're going to go through a season of directly increasing revenue. Does this mean we're not making money while we're? No, it just means that's not our primary emphasis. Primary emphasis can switch and then switch, but it's not rapid switching. It's strategic switching. It's thoughtful switching. It's recognizing that I don't have to go all the way to the extreme on one, but I do need to pick one because I can only do one thing at a time. So do it well, so that then you can go to the other one and do that well, and then do that well. That's the either and. That's how you find balance. There are times when I'm at work and I'm going to work. There are times when I'm at home, I want to be at home. We all struggle with this, and these things have made it incredibly harder to make those separations. I've done a work in Germany before, and I'm fascinated by something. Like Germany's like the fifth largest economy in the world, even though it's a fraction of the U.S. population, 40 million or something like that. Maybe 80 million in Germany, but we're 330 or something. But it's the fifth largest economy in the world. How does it do that? Well, one of the ways is, and this always shocks people, they have a mandatory work week that is capped at 48 hours. You literally are not allowed legally to work more than 48 hours. And if you are seen trying to force your employees to work more than 48 hours, you will be fined heavily. There's a lot of folks that go over to Germany because they're in the army, U.S. folks, and then they stay. They meet a woman, they meet a man, they stay, and they get hired by a German company, and then they've got a project due the next week, and so they take their work laptop home, and they are fined for it because you're not allowed to. Because they say, when you're at work, you're at work. When you're at home, you're at home. And they take vacation or holiday very, very seriously. They take work very, very seriously. It's incredibly focused while you're at work and incredibly off when you're off. That's a good example of the either and. So think about tensions in your life. Time alone, time with others. Focus on work, focus on play. Focus on family, focus on friends. Time with your spouse, time apart from your spouse. These are all tensions that require management because they're opposing forces that are actually both necessary. When you're faced with that, choose the either and. Pick one, do it well, then pick the other. Do it well, then pick. You will find a more balanced life in that progression because you're recognizing that I can't have balance without tension. This has been The Leader's Pause. I'm your host, Hal Runkle. You can always reach me, at halrunkle.com, or visit my website, halrunkle.com, and have a fantastic, those of you in the U.S., have a fantastic Thanksgiving. Till a couple weeks. See you later.
You have been listening to The Leader's Pause with Hal Runkle, the show that helps leaders like you find calm, get clear, and level up. Tune in every first and third Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern